Pablo Neruda meets Langston Hughes. That seems to me to be the sort of gist that I'm picking up from Wendell Berry. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear, of course, in the poetry discussion playlist here on the channel. The poem in discussion today, the poem in question today, I Go Among Trees, and it reads as such. I go among trees and sit still. All my stirring becomes quiet around me like circles on water. My tasks lie in their places where I left them asleep, like cattle. Then what is afraid of me comes and lives a while in my sight. What it fears in me leaves me, and the fear of me leaves it. It sings, and I hear its song. Then what I am afraid of comes. I live for a while in its sight. What I fear in it leaves it, and the fear of it leaves me, and sings, and I hear its song. After days of labor, mute in my consternations, I hear my song at last, and I sing it. As we sing, the day turns, the trees move. There is something very almost de-evolutionary about this poem, something very base rooted in our psyche, something very sort of, I don't know what the opposite of monumental would be, but something like that, something very small, almost illusory in this poem. But I think there is something still there that is actually tangible. I go among the trees and sit still. All my stirring becomes quiet around me like circles on water. My tasks lie in their places where I left them, asleep like cattle. I've had a hard day, so I go out just to be with nature. And all the stuff that I was doing, all the stuff I left behind when I went outside to be with nature, it's lying where it was, asleep like cattle. Cattle, one of the first things we did when we became sedentary like our speaker becomes in the poem, is we learned to herd. We learned to take care of animals, to foster them, husbandry, all of these things. Those were the things that people like us had to do. Now we have these other things we have to do. You got to do your taxes. You got to do your IKEA furniture. Whatever it is you have to do that frustrated you enough that you had to go sit among the trees, you abandoned those things the way that farmers used to walk out on their cattle and just take a minute with the moon. Then what is afraid of me comes and lives a while in my sight. What it fears in me leaves me, and the fear of me leaves it. It sings, and I hear its song. Now in order to sort of translate this into something digestible, I think that it's easiest with this stanza to go to what is literal here. What does it sound like is happening there? As our speaker is sitting among the trees, a bird lands, and it's hopping around in front of him for a while. You've been here. You've been sitting in nature some time, and a bird will land suspiciously close to you, and then it will notice you. And then it will notice that you notice it, but you haven't tried to kill it. You haven't tried to eat that bird. And so that bird becomes a little more comfortable. And it goes about its singing, its tweeting. It goes about and sings, seeing that you are not that thing that it feared in predators and people. Okay, that's pretty standard. You've noticed that. Birds, squirrels, whatever little woodland creatures, upon which you might stumble. Then what I am afraid of comes. I don't think this is a bear. Bears are terrifying. I think that this is something mental. What I am afraid of comes. Sitting there under the trees looking at the birds, I remember that I am afraid of death. I mean, isn't that what all poetry is about? I remember that I am afraid of being alone. Whatever that fear is, whatever that anxiety is, I live in its sight for a while. While I'm sitting there being afraid of death, while I'm sitting there being afraid of being alone, I am in that thing's crosshairs. What I fear in it leaves it. Being afraid of death is kind of silly because it's not death. Being afraid of being alone is kind of silly because it's not being alone. And the fear of it leaves me. If the fear of dying, the fear of being alone leaves you, it means probably you understand the root fear there. The root fear there isn't probably death, isn't probably being alone. It is probably not being enough. You don't fear dying alone because you're the only person there. You fear dying alone because you fear that to die alone would be justified because you feel as if you are not worthy of having someone. You fear death not because of probably the end itself, though maybe, but probably you fear death because you fear that the time you had here, you squandered. You've wasted it. If you lived the good life, if you lived life to its extent, whatever that means to you, when death came, it would be but a relief. After days of labor, mute in my consternations, I hear my song at last, and I sing it. As we sing, the day turns, the trees move. So here we have the thing which is afraid of me shows up, realizes that I am not scary, so it sings. What I am afraid of shows up, I stop being afraid of it, and it sings. And then, after days of labor and these mute consternations, I, the speaker in question, hears their very own song. Here's the song that they were meant to sing, and they sing. This makes the song itself seem as if it is not laborious. This makes the song itself seem as if it is instinctual. You've heard birds call. Did anyone teach them that? Did they go to grammar school? Or is it just in their soul, baby? Seems to me that's the case. This poem is saying that there is that instinctual song within you. There is that instinctual song to do with you. There is that instinctual song to your life. And the only way to get to that song, to rediscover that song, as our speaker themselves had forsaken it, forgotten it, lost it. The only way back to that song itself, according to our speaker in this poem, is to not be scary to the things that might fear you and not be scared of the things you might fear. Fear, it seems, is the loop, the nasty loop in question. Yeah, I think that might be right. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about. There's poetry on the channel every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.